Hello literature connoisseurs. This is my summary of the Left Behind book, having looked at it in its entirety. This book is a hot mess in its totality. The characters are nonsensical and the story is unrealistic in many ways, and their plot is supposed to follow Christian theology, but even the authors fail to follow the biblical narratives and the prophecies. There is so much to cover that the trouble is where to begin. Let's start with the characters. They become hard to figure out because we have characters that are believers but at the same time they are not. This creates a lot of confusion as you try to understand them. The descriptions are very poor, so rather than being able to visualize what they look like, much is left to the imagination. However, details get added later, changing preconceived notions, making it difficult to relate to characters that constantly change. The only change to this is Nikolai Carpathia, where the authors are constantly speaking about his looks. This seems to have a homosexual element in their attitudes towards him. They mention constantly that he looks like Robert Redford, who has been out of the acting business for years. This becomes a problem because the goal of this book is said to be a means to reach out to people that do not believe in the Bible and convert them by making them aware of the Christian religion. Choosing an outdated source or actor does not help in this, but rather distances the wanted audience. This theme becomes a problem because although the target audience is said to be Group A, this technically is a lie, as they try to appeal to a Group B being Christians in general. They seem to focus the story more on trying to scare Christians into believing the way they want them to. The book was marketed as being one that is convincing atheists and non-believers to convert to Christianity. The narrative goes along the line of atheists and non-believers have no idea what the Bible says, and once they do, they convert. It is a cute marketing ploy, but nothing based in reality. The only ones that really could be said that converted to their religion were the very young that were already church members to begin with. A Group C because Groups A or B really show no signs or interest in the series and the twisted theology they spew. Right from the beginning of the first chapter we meet Rayford Steele, a middle-aged airplane pilot. Rayford instantly becomes nonsensical because we are told he is cheating on his wife. However, he is not having a real affair, but he is having a made-up affair in his imagination. Even Christians find this plot point utterly absurd, and this helps to be a turn-off to the book. This fake relationship comes up numerous times throughout the book, and he gets depicted as a hero for ending the pretend relationship after the rapture takes place. To make matters worse, Rayford, and the authors, feel that the flight attendant he had this pretend affair with must pay for sins that she had no idea about. She states numerous times that she thought they were really good friends, but she knew he was married and had no interest in him or breaking up their marriage. The rapture happens, and despite how often churches and ministries talk about this topic and end-time prophecies, only a very, very small handful of Christians have any clue what happened. The Christians that get left behind are Christians that go to church but act as if they have never been there before. A very unrealistic portrayal that even the authors shoot themselves in the foot with Rayford. They have him contemplating how he has gone to church for years and has no idea about anything involving his religion. Then 10 chapters later they admit that he knows about what happened because he heard it numerous times in church. So which is it? Does he know about his religion, or is he completely ignorant? Because that is the false dichotomy the authors try to paint involving Christians that are left behind. Rayford paints himself as being very smart and scientific, but his actions and thoughts are just the opposite. It becomes a strange way to paint him because he seems to both believe in God and not believe in him at the same time. If they are trying to paint him as agnostic, this becomes a problem because agnosticism is a knowledge claim. Even if a person is unsure that a God exists, that person still has some preconceived notion where they think that a God exists or not. So a person can be an agnostic theist or an agnostic atheist. Being truly in the middle becomes difficult because other beliefs affect the general stance. Things like a belief in the supernatural pave a way to believe more that a God exists than one not existing. In the same sense, a naturalist would tend to believe more that a God does not exist than one that does. Rayford is very narcissistic as he considers himself to be the best. He thinks of himself as the smartest man in the room. His overinflated ego only gets worse once he converts to Christianity. As typical of all Christians, he needs validation to prove that he did the right thing in converting. He lies, even to himself, and projects his faults onto others. He pretends that he loves his daughter, but when faced with the possibility that she died in a plane crash, he makes a reprehensible snide comment that shows his true feelings about her. He shows her no real affection but only tries to force his religion on her. He mostly shows remorse that she is not as gullible as he is, and the only time he shows affection is when she converts, thus giving him the validation he so desperately needs. He despises his wife and son, then we are supposed to believe he actually loves them when they disappear in the rapture, hoping we ignore the things he previously said about them, and how they were a pain to him, like balls and chains on him. He then lies about facing the wrongdoings that his imagination did. In this he projects them blame from himself onto Hattie, the flight attendant he had the fake affair with. He then makes it his mission to make Hattie pay for not knowing about the affair he imagined. He expects her to pay for it because she should have known it was wrong when she knew nothing about it. Chloe starts out as a strong character, but she becomes progressively weaker as time goes on. Many of her early comments and reasoning made sense and were spot on as to why her father's acceptance of religion were so. She then tries the argument of evil as the justification as to why she will not convert like her father. She admits that she believes in a God, or higher power, but is mad that her mother and brother were taken in the rapture. She then shifts to refusing to accept her father's newfound religion because of her own personal incongruity. She, for some reason, does not want to appear as if she is easily convinced. This seems ludicrous because either you are or you aren't convinced. If you are, then there is no need to work yourself up into believing in the thing you already believe in. In this instance, if asked, do you think that a God exists? Either you do or you do not. Let's suppose in this instance that you do not believe that any gods exist. You already made a judgment and you do not need to be convinced that they do not exist. You would need convincing to believe the opposite, but not what you already believe. Chloe states that she believes in a God, so she doesn't need convincing that a God exists. Believing in a specific God is another story. If I hold a red apple out for you to see and I ask you what color it is, then you know that the apple is red and I don't need to convince you that it is red. If I were to hold out a red apple and I said that the color of the apple is purple, then for you to be skeptical is normal. When it appears red to you, it would take convincing for you to believe that it was purple. Her rationale deteriorated to the point that her conversion makes no sense. She randomly decides to pray and ask God to reveal himself to her. While daydreaming on a plane, she sees that Buck is sitting next to her, and this somehow reveals to her that God is real. It makes no sense why, and she can't even explain it when she tells all this to Buck. She is supposed to be college educated and an adult, yet she acts like a 13-year-old all the time. Not sure if this is a knock against women because of the Christian bias against them or a knock against college students. Buck is another absurd character that thinks he's the world's smartest man. He feels that due to him being so smart that normal rules do not apply to him. He actually is very gullible because whatever gets said to him he believes it instantly. He prides himself on being the world's best journalist, but that is a lie proven over and over again. Because of how easy it is for him to be gullible, it becomes easy for him to fall victim to the cult mentality of Rayford and his friends. He quickly stops being friends with people that Bruce tells him to not be friends with. Buck believes this because Bruce simply said to, and not due to any evidence or reason. Bruce is a wannabe pastor that went to school to become a pastor but has no idea how to preach or do anything. We get told he has a sports magazine addiction and he needs to hide that he reads sports magazines from his family. As bizarre as this is, it could be a cover for a porn edition. A porn addiction would make a lot more sense, although considering the Christian attitude towards porn, it does not make sense to hide this when it can be capitalized on about how evil it is. Every church service he runs is exactly the same as the previous one. He rides the coat-tail of the previous pastor by playing a VCR tape talking about the Bible. He then tells his story and magazine addiction as if anyone should give a fuck. This lets him use emotional manipulation to try and get people to convert. Bruce is about as useful as attaching a car tire to a mountain. Hattie, the flight attendant that Rayford has the imaginary affair with, is the only real character out of the group. Overall, she tries to be positive and supportive of others even at the cost of her own happiness. This causes those that pretend to be her friends to abuse her emotionally. She thought of Rayford as a close friend until he began to treat her like shit. She had no idea that he had any interest in her, and when he tries to convert her by telling her that she needs to pay for her non-existent crimes, she quickly becomes uninterested in his religion as he tells her that she needs to face up to the fact that the non-existent affair was all her fault. Rayford falls under the delusion that if he seems sincere then people will believe his motives and decide to convert. This again shows the foolishness of the authors because basing beliefs on feelings is not a solid foundation. Nikolai Carpathian is a cheat movie star villain that is the Antichrist of the story. He has the powers to use Jedi mind tricks on everyone much like the Emperor from Star Wars. This allows him to manipulate everyone into trusting him. He also pretends to be humble even though he is extremely ambitious. Once his goals are met he murders those in his way or that pose any kind of a threat to him. As he did with Stonegal and Todd C. Buck revealed their plans, and because Nikolai was connected to them he killed them once he became the Secretary General of the United Nations. Moving on to the theology of the book, let's begin with the rapture. This series follows a pre-tribulation rapture which has long since been debunked by biblical scholars. The concept was first penned in the 1830s. Since the time of this book being written, a massive shift to a post-tribulation rapture has been happening. Scholars and theologians cannot confidently present a pre-trib rapture as being viable due to the lack of evidence in the Bible. The Bible plays a tiny role in this narrative as it is mentioned but rarely actually quoted. We get told that the Bible says this and the Bible says that, but no real verses are given to prompt inquiry. This again points to the fact that the authors believe that their audience already knows the material, making it difficult if someone was a true seeker trying to learn a few basics. If the author's true intentions were to teach people about what they believe, this presents a problem. We are given no evidence that a God exists. Instead they make an argument from ignorance stating the disappearances could only come about as the supposed Bible predicts. This is because they have no understanding of how this could happen unless it were a supernatural event. This also assumes that their belief in such an event actually happens. The authors also fail in their understanding of prophecy because while the Bible makes both true and false predictions, they choose to deviate from how the prophecies are written. A good example are the fake witnesses. The Bible predicts that these two men will be able to do miracles in the forms of plagues. It also states that if anyone tries to kill them before the end of their allotted time, they can breathe fire like dragons and kill their attackers. The Bible then states that this is how their attackers must be punished. The problem is that this never occurs. We read about an attack and the attackers die of heart attacks in the middle of their assault. Already we have a problem because these witnesses are not fulfilling prophecy as the Bible states. The authors then try to use this as evidence for their beliefs, but is it? It's hard to take seriously that the Bible prophecies are being fulfilled when they actually are not. I believe there was some controversy over this, causing the authors to revise their characters to appease their Christian readers. Emotional manipulation is the only way they seem to know how to attract attention. They write uninteresting characters in ridiculous situations that their readers cannot identify with. A love affair in the mind of the main character that makes him think he needs to punish the woman who knew nothing about it, is absurd. A pastor with a sports magazine addiction is not relatable. However, an obsession with Robert Redford is very telling about how the authors feel. What becomes really absurd is when Rayford needs his victims to believe in his sincerity. As mentioned, sincerity matters nothing unless the claim can be proven true. No matter how sincere Rayford thinks of himself, he still can be 100% wrong. His sincerity amounts for nothing at that point. Most Christians would be trying to prove Jesus in order to get a person to believe their religion. That does not happen here, as Jesus gets overlooked completely. The theme of this book is that you don't need Jesus, just believe in God. Another major leap is when Chloe decides to convert because she saw Buck sitting next to her. This leads to a non sequitur fallacy because her fallacious reasoning, even when she tries to explain it, makes no sense. Everything gets built upon feelings, and as previously mentioned, feelings can be wrong. No matter how sincere one person thinks they are, the feelings can be wrong. Ideally, the target audience that the authors are going for are people that are gullible. Gullible to believe in their religion. Gullibly enough to be easily swayed by a scary possibility without any evidence that it will occur. Just a tired old threat of one day you'll find out we are right, even though that will never happen. Although Christians would have enjoyed something along the lines of the movie God's Not Dead, instead they got this subpar drivel that even they hate. Which is why this series was quickly left on the forgotten pages of history by Christians themselves. Thank you for following this book and hope to see you in the next one.